guys, welcome to SheKnowsArsenal. My name is Jessica. I'm your host. You can follow me on Twitter at HJessino, and this is SheKnowsArsenal Daily News. This is a new thing that we're trying to give you guys more than one stream a day. So the earlier stream is always going to be news related / maybe like a smaller episode, kind of around the game that just happened, and then later on the big shows will happen. So don't fret. We're gonna still have 2 shows a day, or we're gonna have 2 shows a day. So if you can't make it for these ones, fine. If you can only make it for the later ones, it's fine. Gonna try to show up for you guys at least 4 times a week, 2 times a day, if that makes sense. So there's about 14 of you guys watching, which is more than I thought. Because I was like, this is such a weird time. Maybe nobody will show up. But yeah, get in the chat box and let me know where you guys are watching in from. Harry will be here in just a second to join me. He actually just showed up, so I'm going to go ahead and bring him in now. Hey, Harry, how are you?
Hey, what's up? Are we live? We're live.
Yeah, we're live. We're live.
Hello.
So yeah, no worries. But yeah, I just thought that it would be interesting because there's not really a lot of news, and I kind of wanted these earlier shows to be more about news. Obviously, in the next couple of weeks, there'll be a lot of transfer news, but I thought it might be interesting to just kind of, instead of do a deep dive into the game, because I'll be doing that later, just to kind of go over 3 big takeaways that we can take away from the game against Liverpool, where we got slapped, So I thought that could be kind of interesting. But just in general, how are you feeling right now about the game? Are you devastated? Are you mad? Are you just mad? How do you feel? Because we didn't really talk before the game. So did you think that there was a chance that we'd actually win, or did you kind of anticipate us struggling in this game?
I didn't think we'd win. I thought we might go there and play better, but I totally appreciated that Liverpool are they're years ahead of us in many respects. So I went in there feeling a little bit optimistic, but I wasn't devastated that we lost. I think I'm been trying to look at the bigger picture before that game. And I've convinced myself that if we're to make top 4, it's about beating everyone else. So I've got to be honest with you, I wasn't too sad. I do find the overreaction from some fans a little bit surprising, considering what good form we've shown since the Man City game. But I totally get it. We want to be competitive in these games, and ultimately we weren't. We were well beaten, comprehensively beaten. So yeah, I mean, I wasn't too sad. I think it's a good thing, if anything. I think it keeps us all a little bit more humble. It makes us realise that there's a long way for us to go to achieve what we want to achieve, and and it's still a few seasons away. So I wasn't too sad, to be honest with you. Liverpool are a great team, and fair play to them for capitalising on our naivety and our mistakes, and just literally just hammering us. So it is what it is, and we've got some big games coming up to make sure that this defeat is just something that we can easily forget about.
Yeah, is it fair to say that in the analysis of this game, we can look micro and macro and kind of just be like, okay, well, it was a slapping. It didn't feel good. We anticipated being because of our good form, maybe being more competitive than we were. But from a bigger perspective, it doesn't really change what we're trying to do this season. I think that's fair, because I don't think it's fair to just wave it away and be like, it's okay to get slapped by Liverpool the way that we did, because had we had lost 2-0 and had some more chances and stuff, it may have felt different, but we didn't lay a glove on them, but it's also not fair to go way to the other spectrum and say well, because we weren't competitive against Liverpool, everything that we did prior to that means absolutely nothing,
Yeah, totally. I think I said on Twitter Spaces before, I said, like, a lot of Arsenal fans are saying, I want to see effort, I want to see endeavour. And I said, yeah, you can see all of those things, but that won't necessarily translate into goals. That won't rule out the possibility of getting a hide in. I think we need to appreciate that there are teams better than us that have went to Liverpool and have been comprehensively beaten. Maybe not by 4 goals, maybe by 3, but there are teams that have really, really beaten Liverpool well. So who have lost to Liverpool well, who are much better than us. So I just knew that if we go there and have a slight off day, Liverpool will just capitalise on that. And that's what happened. We were nervous on the ball. We were timid. Our touches were loose. And Liverpool sense blood. So I don't think there needs to be like this dramatic outlook in terms of, oh my God, we're miles off Liverpool, we're never going to get there. It's just a case that they were on it, we were below par, and that's what happens. Those two things mixed together, there's always going to be, a poor defeat, and that's what it was.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that's fair enough. And I don't know. I just feel like, I thought that it would be a lot closer, but then I also thought we'd play better. And I thought that maybe I was hoping that they would still be in that bad form that they were in. Because let's be real, even their bad form was like undefeated in so many games and all of that. They were just leaking a couple more goals. So it was never really a matter of, you know, can we keep them from scoring? I think we all knew that they would score goals. It was whether we could score goals on them, and it just didn't really manifest itself that way. And I don't think, I don't know. I guess we can get into it when we talk about our three big things, but I'm also seeing some narrative kind of around, well, we should be a lot closer to them because we spent 150 million over the summer. And I just feel like it's a really reductive way of thinking about things. Yeah, we probably we should be able to compete with them more, but just because we spent money over the summer doesn't mean that the quality that we brought in at the moment is anywhere near. They had like 6 world-class players on the pitch. Like when I thought about it, like when I was watching Thiago and Fabinho just, trap the ball into the air, it's like sky high and just like easily cushion the ball down, just turn so easy. Thiago's just like, I'm just here, no big deal, world class, whatever. They just fire like 30-yard passes into Salah's feet, stops it dead. He just dribbles off. I'm like, wow, that's like serious quality. Like, we really didn't buy that level, but yeah, I mean, they were really good. Like if it wasn't us, I would have really enjoyed watching them play because I was like, wow,
I
they're
mean,
really good.
you're looking at a team, at the peak of their powers, and even though they're off a poor run, and even though there's a few players missing, there's just a confidence to their play. Every single player understands that system, whether it's Robertson or Tsimikas left back. Arnold obviously is incredible going forward. And in Jota, Mane, and Salah, you've got these three wingers who are basically forwards, and they are just incredibly clinical, and they have a wonderful understanding. And it's really simple. Like Salah is in his late 20s, Mane is, I think, he's early 30s. Am I wrong? Or is Mane 29, 30? Yeah.
Like
Jota,
all of their team is late 20s, early 30s.
Exactly. And you've got Saka and Emil Smith Rowe who are babies in the grand scheme of things. So, in 2 to 3 seasons, hopefully that's where we'll be, and we'll be a lot closer to them. But, they lost to Liverpool they lost to West Ham because West Ham got at Liverpool. They made it tough. They made it hard. Antonio got into Van Dijk. He ran alongside him. And we're not that team. We're a team that want the ball. We want to be in charge of the game. And whether Arteta's ego took over himself a little bit, maybe the overconfidence of the previous results took over it. But in hindsight, and I'm sure we'll go over it, maybe the team selection could have been altered a little bit to make us a little bit more competitive, to make us a little bit more resolute. But yeah, listen, Liverpool or Chelsea or Man City are going to win the league. It's one of those three teams. We've been well beaten by all of those three. I hoped it would have been different as we've now got more of an identity, but it wasn't to be, and we move on to the next games.
Yeah, for sure. And just before we get into our three big things, all the results pretty much went in our way. And a lot of people are like, well, we're lucky that the results went in our direction. But it's not just that. It's also the fact that we won the games that we were supposed to, that keep us in a position where if we do lose to Liverpool, we drop points, we're still in 5th. So it's a combination of a little bit of luck. West Ham dropped points. Wolves won, like those little things, plus the fact that we won our game. So we have to give ourselves some credit. But there's about 40 of you guys watching on all platforms, which again is more than I thought at this weird time of the day. Maybe this is a good time to go live. I don't know. But make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll go ahead and start with one of my big things. It might be similar to something you have to say. It's about just personally for me, my first big takeaway from this game is Granit Xhaka and Tierney walk straight back into the team. Like I feel like, I know we don't, like, there's a huge divide in terms of Granit. Do we need him? Did we survive this period? Did we thrive without him? And I think we survived without him. We didn't thrive without him. I think because it's not only a matter of like what Sambi can do, it's also what having Sambi next to Thomas does to Thomas and how it doesn't allow him to do what he wants to do. And Granit is not everybody's favorite. He's not my favorite. Personally, I feel like I would prefer another midfielder there. But if I have the choice between Ainsley Maitland-Niles, who was not great when he came on against Liverpool, Sambi, or Granit, I still think Granit is our best possible option next to Thomas Partey. He gives us the best possible scenario to allow Thomas to push up a little bit further, do what he does. So if there was any question whether Granit walks straight back into this team or if we need him in the short term, prior to a big summer signing, I think a lot of that was answered in this game. When we play bigger teams, when we play teams that put us under a lot of pressure, Sambi is not ready. And I personally don't really think that we anticipated Sambi having to play this amount of games this early, because nobody would have anticipated Xhaka being injured. The idea was for Partey and Xhaka to play most of these games together. And our best games that we've had midfield-wise have come with those two in that pivot. I still think our best midfield performance came against Spurs. And I know it's a dead Spurs team and all of that, but that midfield performance was a grown-up one. And all the performances that we've had since then have been okay, but definitely not good enough. And I think that showed in this particular game that Xhaka walked straight in. Also, Tierney, no shade to Nuno, great player. Definitely, I think has a bright future, has different tools in his toolbox than Tierney does. But Tierney adds that little bit of leadership and experience, and he's not as bad as people I think he is, because he didn't play with the team that was playing well. He played with the team that wasn't playing well. And I'd like to see him come back in against Newcastle. I think it's still his spot to lose. And Nuno showed his inexperience, and it may be a little bit of projection, but I don't think Tierney turns around and passes those blind passes back to the back line for Jota to pick off in that game. I don't think Tierney does that. I think he kicks it forward, under pressure. So that's my big thing. My first one is that Xhaka and Tierney walk straight back into this team.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard because a lot of the negative opinion over Arsenal's recent good form has been that we haven't really played anyone and we haven't been tested. And if you're to use that barometer, then you'd say, well, we can't get too excited about the performances during that run. And whilst I really was surprised by Tavares' performances, I did see a rawness to his game, some poor decision making in those moments. And it's not to say that they'll stick around forever. I think he's got a real bright future. But I saw few things in there where I thought, Kieran Tierney comes straight back in against Liverpool for me. If Tierney was fit, and I say that because I'm assuming that Arteta wanted to rest him after those two Scotland games. That's the only reason why I can think that he didn't start him, because otherwise I'd accuse Arteta of being really naive when it comes to picking Tavares over Tierney, especially in a game of that magnitude. So I assume he was just a little bit fearful of chucking Tierney straight in after those two games against Scotland. Like I say, I really like Tavares. I like his youthfulness. I like his rawness. I like the way he plays the game quite spontaneously. But, against Salah, it's always going to be tough. And he didn't cover himself in glory. But that's not to say he won't be a great player. And with regards to Xhaka, you know how I feel. I feel like in those games, there'll be times when you need control, and he gives you that. There's a sensibility to his play, which is really important. I feel like he understands the narrative of a game and where the game is at that time. So if we're under pressure, I feel like he's a good player to have in that midfield because he'll make the right decision. I think he takes care of the ball, and I think we missed that. Now, listen, if Xhaka and Tierney started, do I think the game would have been much different? I don't think it would have. I just think when we had the ball, we would have been a little bit more sensible with it, and it wouldn't have been like a hot potato. And it would have also released Thomas Partey a little bit more, which may have changed the dynamic of the game completely. We'll never know that. But I do think in those big games, if Granit Xhaka's fit, I think you start him. And it's not to undermine Sambi at all. I think there's been some really good performances with Sambi, but then you could say, who are we playing? Look at the opposition. Of course, you can only beat what's in front of you, but you do know when you go against a tougher opposition, your game will be tested much, much more. And it was. There were a few times when we tried to carry the ball out from the back, and Liverpool just intercepted it because their players are better. Their players are more alert, they're more agile, they're switched on, they're hungrier, they were more aggressive. So you don't
I
get that
couldn't
time with.
believe like what I was seeing. Some of the stuff I was seeing, I was like, they're really good.
Yeah, they are.
They're
And do
really
you know what?
good.
And that's it. They are really good. There was one time when Ben White, I think, tried to drive with the ball and it just got intercepted. There was one time when I think the ball got played to ESR with his like back to play and someone just nipped in. And that's what I mean. If you're not on it, you're gonna
Yeah.
get eaten up. And when you play against other teams, they might not go into you as quickly. When Ben White is driving, they might back off a little bit. But Liverpool aren't going to do that. They're going to try and win the
Yeah,
ball
they were
back and
like,
press
"Nah,
high.
bro." Like, even
Yeah.
with Saka, like, he tried to drive in a couple of times and they just kind of shrugged him off. And I just thought, ah, you
Mm,
know, ah, this is the Liverpool that I remember.
yeah.
Out of all of the teams that we played during the season, I always make a note of when we play Liverpool because they're the team that I hate to play the most, more than City. Because City will play with you a little bit, score a couple of goals, and let you go on your merry way, let you play
Yeah.
a little bit. Liverpool doesn't do that. They just stomp you out. Like they just, I mean, wow. It
Mm,
was just what they can do is very intense. But I agree with what like everything that you've said, and I think it's just important to like remember that. I agree. I don't think that it would have changed everything. I don't think we win the game with those two players. I just feel like without that little bit of respite and that little bit of experience to kick the ball forward when needed, to circulate the ball when needed, to make the right passes when needed, would have given us some breathing room because I felt like in certain spells the back line was being battered. And in that time, you're definitely going to give up goals, especially against a really good team. So, yeah, I fully expect those two players to come straight back in. But there's about 50 of you guys watching. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are doing 3 big takeaways that, we can take away from this game. So if you guys want to drop yours in the chat, feel free to do that. Makes a lot of sense, so we can kind of get yours because it might be different than what we have to say. But Blaze says, "Hi, Jessica and Harry. Hey to you. Do you worry that Arsenal don't have the leaders who could lead young teams to win because experienced players like Abba, Laka, Party, Pepe in big games are very bad? What do you think about that? You do lack a little bit of, I know you're a big, like, when we were talking about in the summer, you kind of advocated for some more experienced players coming in. And now that you've seen some like our younger players play in some biggish games, some not so biggish games, do you think that that leadership group that we have, the small experience group of experienced players that we have, do you think that they are pulling their weight or do you think that they're letting us down?"
I think they're pulling their weight in effort, maybe not in individual performances. I think we have to be careful of not making too many conclusions after playing a team like Liverpool because I've seen a lot of question marks over Aubameyang and whether White is at the level and whether Partey is good enough and whatnot. I think they could have all played better in Aubameyang and Partey. I think Lacazette tried, but it's just a tough game for them to get involved in. But it's a really tough one because I feel like having experienced players is really, really good, but it's important to have the right experienced players, with the right profile and the right mentality. I don't think Thomas Partey and Aubameyang and Lacazette, and the team down in that respect. I just don't think we played well enough to see them have an effect in the game. I did want to see a little bit more from Aubameyang. I feel like sometimes Aubameyang gives defenders a real easy day. And that's always my concern with Aubameyang. While he's improved his pressing and he's definitely improved his aggression, he's definitely improved his link-up play. I do feel like against these colossal defenders like Virgil van Dijk, I just feel like he just goes, this is going to be really, really tough today. And if there's a ball down the side, I really don't want to be going up against Van Dijk. I don't want to get shoulder barged. So he kind of eases off his sprint. So I perhaps didn't see enough in their individual performances. But like I say, I think they've done pretty well so far this season. So I wouldn't want to draw too many conclusions on their leadership qualities. I think only time will tell, to be honest with you. I think it's too early to make any assumptions as of yet.
All right, then. So what's your first big takeaway from this game?
So mine is going to be that I feel like one of Erdegaard or Xhaka always need to start in the team. And I know we spoke about Xhaka, so I feel like I'll go with Erdegaard. I've really enjoyed seeing what Lacazette is doing, in this 4-4-1-1 or 4-4-2. I mean, it still feels like a 4-2-3-1, but I've really enjoyed seeing him play closer to Aubameyang and press. But I feel like for what we gain in that, we lose on overall control. And whilst Ødegaard has maybe struggled to impose himself, I feel like for us to get further up the pitch with possession and not just one ball to Lacazette, for us to really progress up the pitch, I feel like a player like Ødegaard will prove to be really important to our team. And there were times yesterday, I know he didn't cover himself in glory when he came on, but you could say the game was kind of already done there. I do feel like we have to be careful that we don't cash in our checks on too many individual performances, similar to Tavares, similar to Lacazette. I think it's important to find context, and I think Arteta has to maybe understand, or he needs to find out, how do I want to move forward? Because is Lacazette and Aubameyang part of the long-term plan this season? Because I don't believe it is. I feel like it was a short-term fix to give us some injection after a few subdued performances against Brighton and Palace. I think it was about getting someone with a little bit more gamesmanship, a little bit more know-how. And then I think Lacazette helped us get over that little bump. And, we played well against Spurs and we came around the corner.
And to get some more experience on the pitch as well, because without Granit and without Tierney, you're missing some bigger personalities out on the pitch. Maybe Lacazette was out there also for that, as well.
Yeah, true, definitely. I think it certainly helped us, and I'm not taking anything away from Lacazette's performance, but I just don't see enough players who want to dictate the game centrally, to be honest with you. And whether that's me wanting more from Thomas Partey or Lokonga, I just think that with Ødegaard in that midfield three, we'll just get someone who is more eager to get on the ball and to link up play and to find those passes to Saka and ESR. I think Lacazette's done really well, and he played a few good balls on Saturday as well. But I just personally think that the long-term identity of this team is a more traditional 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3. And for me, that's why we signed Ødegaard, right? I know we didn't go and get Maddison, but we signed Ødegaard to play in our team. So I feel like these are the games that he should be featuring or should be starting to get that experience. And if he plays bad, he plays bad. But I feel like we are now going into some tough away games where maybe we won't have the ball as much. Maybe, maybe against Everton, might play really, really well and we need to retain possession. And I think Ødegaard gives us that chance. So that would be one of my takes. And once again, I'm not taking away anything from Lacazette whatsoever. I think he's been really, really brilliant. I think he's been wonderful. But I would just like to see Ødegaard play and find out if he's good enough, really.
Yeah, I mean, Ødegaard is somebody that I'm looking at for the Newcastle game, thinking that might be a good game for you to come back into. I think there was always going to be an expiration date on Lacazette and Aubameyang together. I think it works for like 2 or 3 games, and then it's like, no, it's not really working as good as we thought. And because it's not really what we want to do. We're playing both of them we're playing both of them together because the only playing 2 of them together gets us enough, and it's still not good enough. In the long, it's really not good enough. But the 2 of them together makes the kind of the striker that we wish we had, kind of. So I think it's short term, but I think Ødegaard should probably play against Newcastle. It's a game that we should have the majority of the possession. Maybe bring Tierney back in. And see what we do from there. And then Arteta has to figure out, does he want to play Aubameyang or Lacazette in that game? But we'll see what happens. G. Cassie is saying that some fans are calling this game a free hit, but West Ham were able to get a win. Brentford were able to get a point, as well as Brighton after being 2-0 down. I think this is something that gave me a little bit of false hope, I think, because every circumstance, every team is different. And we're in and around West Ham, but we're completely different than West Ham in our buildup and makeup of our team. And when you look at West Ham, you see a team that has very strong outlets and can perform against teams that press them because they're equally as aggressive. Brighton is a team that can press you as well. They're one of the best pressing teams in the league. So they also are the kind of team that can go up against a Liverpool and kind of give them that to and fro, where for us, because we're more of a possession-based team, we don't like to be pressed. So even though it on paper, it should be, well, a lesser team and another lesser team got points, you have to look at what they have. Brentford also are big, aggressive, play long ball, have good outlets up top. One of our biggest issues when we play against teams that press, which was Liverpool and Brighton in particular, is we just don't have the outlets. When they press us and we kick it long, there's nobody to hold the ball up. We can't go for second balls because we can't move out of our spots, because like if Thomas moves out of that position to go try to get a second ball and he doesn't win it, what happens then when they get in behind? So I think on paper it should make sense that if lesser teams should get points, then we should as well. You also have to remember that there's a lot of context in there that
They were
Liverpool
both at
were
home though, right? Sorry, that West Ham and Brentford
uh
both played at home, right?
I think West Ham played at home, Brighton played at Liverpool, and Brentford played at home.
Brentford, yeah.
So they didn't have to play away. Two of them didn't have to play away, but also just they didn't have to play against Thiago and Fabinho, and a Liverpool trying to change the narrative that they're not this team that's slipping away from the title race. Like there's a lot of different factors. Also, big teams play better against big teams. It's a scalp. There's a reason why Liverpool played the way that they did against us and Man United, and they slipped against Brentford and West Ham. That doesn't mean that those teams are better than us. It just means that they were unwilling to drop points against Arsenal and Man United. There's a lot of different things mixed up in there. So for me, it's not as straightforward as if Brentford and them got points, then we should be able to. Should we have been more competitive? Absolutely. But you can't deny the fact that, like, we're just not the type, we have not figured out a solution for being pressed. We don't have the outlets. When you look at Brentford, they have Tony and Wembu and all of these players that, like, we just don't have that, So it's not an excuse. It's just more like you have to think of all the different factors that would make it more difficult for us to get points than other teams. Is that fair to say? You feel the same
Yeah,
way?
yeah, I think so. I mean, when I use the term, because I've used the expression free hit, for me, that's almost saying that let's not have a meltdown after we lose. Of course, a free hit doesn't mean we just go there and give up and not fight. But like you say, I think it's about understanding, what each team is good at. And West Ham, like I said, will make it difficult for you. They'll be aggressive. They'll go long. Souček and Declan Rice are physical monsters, whereas we're not that sort of team. We'll let you play because we hope that you'll let us play, and then the game becomes a little bit more tactical, and ultimately, Liverpool are way too better of us in that system. If we were to try to do what West Ham did, we probably would have just got bullied as well. So I think it's important, not to make too many comparisons. And like you say, Liverpool, they raised their game against us. They had a point to prove, and unfortunately, we were the victims.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I think that we should be more competitive, but I can also understand why we weren't at the same time. So there's about 60 of you guys watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. My next big takeaway is we are not a team that can be pressed. I know we kind of just talked about it, but it's the one thing that just, when I was thinking about the game prior to, I thought, what's going to be the difference between this and Brighton? The reason why we did not play well against Brighton was not because it was cold and rainy. That added to some of it, but it's really just Brighton are one of the best pressing teams in the league. They just are. Like if you look at their pressing statistics, they're right up there with the Cities and the Liverpools. They just don't have the same clinical edge. So when I was thinking about how we're going to get out, I thought, so when they press us, what are we going to do? We're going to kick it forward. You can't kick it to Aubameyang. You can't kick it to Aubameyang and Lacazette and ESR and Saka. They're just not, they don't make the right decisions. They kind of can easily be knocked off the ball. And we have to figure out a solution to being pressed, because if it's just as simple as mark Thomas Partey out of the game, mark all of our, our fullbacks, and just hope that we kick it long, and then that's our solution. We don't have one. We're always going to struggle. I think the league is becoming more of a pressing league. Everybody's trying to implement that in some way, and we're not in a position to really combat that. Now, against lower opposition, we can get away from them, but it scares me that Brighton could do the same thing as Liverpool did to us with less quality. The only difference is that they couldn't put the ball away. So we need a solution. And I think that comes with obviously a big purchase in midfield as well as a big purchase up top. But in the meantime, we're going to struggle against teams that press us. And Yeah, it's a little bit
Mm.
worrying. If that's the blueprint, it's just make sure you can't get it to Thomas Partey, kill their outlets, and we have no answer for it, you know? So, yeah, let's
Yeah, I
see.
agree. I think a few times there was nervousness on the ball as well, which certainly doesn't help. So when the ball was going out to Tomiyasu, his touch wasn't very assured. And then, once your first touch is poor, then instead of passing the ball, you almost passing the blame because they've had time to press. And the next person that gets the ball is under more pressure. And then there isn't that outlet ball. And then it's also about the narrative of the game. The reason why we can't beat the press is because we're taking so many goal kicks, right? The reason why we're taking so many goal kicks is because they're having so many efforts on goal. So if we can just try to get the ball higher up the pitch and play in their
Mhm.
half, then we're beating the press without actually beating the press. Against Watford, we weren't really forced to do that as much because we had the ball in their half so much. So everything was in front of us, and the game was a lot easier. Whereas against Liverpool, yeah, it is slightly worrying. And I think if you combine Liverpool's press with a nervousness in your possession play, it's a real bad combination. And that's why they just, turned over possession so many times, and Ramsdale had to keep us in the game so many times because we weren't keeping the ball. I don't think we can't not beat the press, Jess. I just think on Saturday we were poor in possession. That's how I view it.
Mhm.
I just feel like we were just poor in possession. Our passing wasn't crisp enough. Our first touch certainly wasn't crisp enough, and there was too much hesitancy in our playing trying to beat the press. That's how I feel. But you might be right. It might be a case of that essentially teams that aggressively press us, force us into those areas, and we don't know how to overcome that. It's probably a mixture of both things.
There's a lot of people are saying the exact same things, which is interesting because I didn't really think of it this way. But Rahul says we don't have technically gifted players like Carzola. Terrence says most teams don't have technically gifted players like Carzola. Um, the club is paying for having never replaced Santi. Like, do you think we're missing a player of that quality in our midfield? We don't have somebody that can solve problems from deep. We have Odegaard, but I tend to feel like he needs to be at this moment in time further up the pitch and a little bit further away from our goal. But Santi
Mm,
was somebody that could operate in the center circle and get us out of trouble. And he was next to somebody like a Coquelin who could kind of sweep up, but he orchestrated from deep and gave us that outlet. And he was so good on the ball that people they didn't even press him because they knew that he was going to get away from them. He's too smart. Do we lack that presence in midfield? And is that, I know you don't think that we need to replace Granite, but if we were to replace him, is that the midfielder that's missing, or are we missing the more defensive minded midfielder? I think that's the two schools of thought that we're living at right now as Arsenal
mm.
fans. What do you personally think? Is it Santi or is it Gilberto that we're missing?
I mean, listen, we miss both, and you're always going to miss Santi, right? I don't think you'll find another Santi. That's a truly unique player who is 5 foot nothing, both footed. Even though he's small, he's strong on the ball, can go either way, can pass, can dribble. He's got had that little burst of pace to get away from players. So we have to be careful of not wanting what we can no longer have, and I don't think you're ever going to find a Cazorla. And if that player does exist, he's probably already at a great team. I think for me, it's more about finding out what Thomas Partey is, because then I think that concludes what we actually need. So for me, it's like I have to be honest with you. I still don't know what Thomas Partey is, and maybe I had a false perception of what Partey is, and I thought I was getting something else because I saw
You're
moments
so
of it
lucky
where
George is not here. He would
I'm
blow
sorry,
his fucking head
I'm
if he
sorry,
heard
but
you say
I'm
that.
sorry, but I saw moments of it when he travels with the ball, and I think, oh, I love this. And then sometimes I just see someone who doesn't influence the game as much as he should have. That's how I feel personally. You could put that down to
Yeah.
fitness and him just coming back. I totally get that. They're all fair reasons, but I think it's important that we understand what Thomas Partey is, and then we know what we need next to Thomas Partey. Because at the minute, it feels like Thomas Partey plays better with Granit Xhaka, right? And Granit Xhaka is a more not a defensive midfielder, but more of a deep line defensive minded midfielder, I'd say. So I would be more inclined to say go find a better version of a Granit Xhaka or a variation of a Granit Xhaka like a Basuma over a Santi Cazorla, because my fear is that a Santi Cazorla type player has to be like physically on it, has to be defensively aware, he has to be from a mentality perspective, has to be ready for those central midfield battles. And I think those players are really, really rare. I can't think of many examples of of ball playing midfielders who can play that deep and get on the ball, and also who want to stay deep, right? Bruno Fernandes is one of those players that's really, really good on the ball, but he wants to affect the pitch much higher up. So I think it's quite hard to find a Santi Cazorla. But I'd be interested to know from you, or Jess, if you can tell me what type of midfielder Thomas Partey
Oh my
is.
gosh! So I
Because I know
have,
you're part of the
I,
TP fan club. You are part of
yeah,
the
I,
TPFC
I'm
all
a
day.
I had a full blown meltdown in one of our Twitter group chats this morning because I just feel like I don't think Thomas Partey was good yesterday. I really don't. I'm not going to sit here and say that I thought that he was great and everybody is just blind. It's not that. But I also feel like we're doing that thing again as a club and as a fan base where we're not really seeing that, like, although we spend 45 million on a player that's supposed to change our midfield, it's kind of difficult to do that when you don't have the other pieces in and around you to get you ticking. The team it's a machine, and without one piece or a couple of pieces, it just is not going to work the same. For me, Thomas Partey is somebody that he needs a more defensive minded player next to him that can sweep up. Like, people are like, I thought we were getting Vieira, where you would get something similar to that if you had a Gilberto next to him. The issue with that is that I feel like a lot of the Arsenal fan base has a almost recency bias to want a midfield that is more similar to Santee plus Coquelin plus Ramsey, that kind of vibe, because it's a little bit more flary, it's a little bit more technical, and it's a little bit more new. So when you see Thomas and you're like, oh, we're going to buy another defensive midfielder, we're going to be so defensive. But what that allows for you to do is allow Thomas to go a little bit further up, press a little bit more, and play those incisive balls in between the lines to the players that we want him to. He's not ever going to give you the goals from midfield that Ramsey did. So you're never going to get that from him. So if that's what you want in a midfielder, then you're looking for something different. But there's no way to get the most out of Thomas Partey and bring in a Santee and play him next to him, because you're just not going to have that defensive stability. So for me, I'm thinking I would prefer us to get the more defensive-minded midfielder first, get the most out of Thomas for the next 2 years, because let's be real, he's 29 years old. We only have like 2 more years of the best possible Thomas before he starts to really decline. So, or that's just what I think. So, but there's no way that you bring in somebody like a Santee, and in my mind, that's somebody like an Awar. You stick him next to Thomas in a pivot, and we don't give a shit ton of goals up. It's not going to happen. So
I agree.
that's kind of what I think. But he's definitely underperforming. But I think some of that has to do with the environment and the fact that he doesn't have Xhaka next to him, or more of a CDM next to him to sweep up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a really good point. It's funny because when Granit Xhaka used to receive a lot of criticism, I used to say the same thing. I was like, well, Granit needs someone next to him, who can do that work, who has legs, who can progress the ball a little bit quicker, or who can get in the box and score.
It took us 4 years to get Granit, the player that if he had when he first came in, we wouldn't be talking about him the way that we talk about him now. We do this all the time. If we had bought Thomas Partey or Thomas Partey player right after we bought Granit, things would be so much different. But now it's 5 years into Granit being here, a year into Thomas being here. They're not playing together because they're getting injured at different times. And we just don't ever finish the project. Finish the midfield, like finish it. But it's almost like it doesn't mean anything because we know Granit is going to leave and Thomas is 29. So, like, what are we doing?
I suppose with Partey, and it's not his fault, but because of his history, because of his successful time at Atletico Madrid, because of the price tag, because of the links we make to Vieira, which is obviously our choice, there's probably an expectation to want more, to see this powerhouse really dominate games, even if he is playing next to someone lesser. You want him to grab the game as a Vieira would, even if Gilberto wasn't there. Vieira would still dominate a game next to Ray Parlour. Not to say, and that's not to say that Partey has to be like Vieira, but I suppose.
Well, Vieira was a world-class player. I don't think.
Yeah.
Even though we say that Thomas is world-class, Vieira was the cream of the crop.
Yeah. But I mean, I suppose we just want to see more, and then there's the reasons. Well, Partey needs X, Y, Z to make it work for him, and then that's totally fine. I suppose it's just about expectations and perhaps what you want to see. And if we were to make the same, not excuses, but if we were to make the same reasons for someone like Pepe would say, well, that's not acceptable, right? Pepe needs an overlapping right back. Pepe needs, I don't know, a creative midfielder inside him to play in balls. Pepe needs the ball quicker. It'd be like, well, no, he's just not being good enough. So ultimately, I just think I just want Partey to play better.
Yeah. I mean, it could just be as
who,
simple as that. That's
yeah,
fair enough.
exactly.
Like, that's fair
Anyway,
enough. Yeah. I get that. Because there are times where I'm looking at him and I'm like, why'd you just pass that ball out of bounds like that? Like, like, I do get upset because I know it's coming, but like, yeah, it's we can expect more from him because of the caliber of player that he is, but also recognize that he's not actually operating in the best possible environment as well. So, it's probably a little bit of both, but We Move says we see how Pedri plays for Barcelona, comfortable on the ball, accurate passes, 10% composed or 100% composed, I think is what you mean. That is the type of player that we need at Arsenal. Our academy keeps promoting fours, no technical mids. The technical mids are a couple years behind. George has spoken about it. A lot of people at Arsenal have spoken about that. We have Charlie Patino. Aziz is out on loan at Portsmouth, and also Salah Adin. The technical mids are there. They're just not ready to come into the first team. So we have to wait a little bit. But I also feel like they will come within the next round of transfers that we have. But I guess I'll go into oh no, you have another big thing. What's your second big thing?
Okay.
Did you
I mean,
have
I did. I love. I mean, it's not really a big thing, but I love Ben White. But I feel like there needs to be a little bit more focus and a little bit more, understanding of the game and the opposition. And I don't want to get carried away. It's certainly not a criticism of him, and this is going to sound a little bit harsh on Ramsdale. There was a time when I think it was either Trent or Ox had a shot with his left foot, and Ramsdale made a really good save, and he kind of turned around and did this cocky laugh, this boastful laugh as to say you can't score. Which I understand, you're playing against international teammates, and I get that. But there was this hint of maybe a little bit more of arrogance or cockiness to our play that I didn't like, and I saw that a little bit in Ben White, and I think that forced him into making silly decisions, and I didn't like it. And I'm not going to dig him out for diving in. When Jota's running at you like that, and he fakes his shoot, it's really hard not to dive in. I can imagine, not many defenders will stay on their feet and come across. But I just feel like away at Anfield, I would have liked to see a more dominating performance from Ben White, or a more sensible performance. I know we have to play out from the back. I know we have to try to beat the press, but there were a few times when I think he could have used the ball better. It's not a criticism of him, and it's not an outlandish take, but just rewatching the game this morning, I was like, oh, you didn't really give me like composed central defender vibes. Like a traditional English centre back is going to be really understand the game and really make the right fouls and make sure you're a little bit mean when it
I think
needs to be.
he was rattled. He gave me Brentford vibes yesterday, like that I'm overwhelmed situation, And I remember that there were times where Gabrielle kind of looked like that last season.
Yeah,
I think
100%.
you have to be wearing the Arsenal shirt at Anfield under pressure to feel it for the first time, and then you're like, okay, and for me, I just looked at the back line, and I know it's not right, but I gave Ramsdale, White, and Gabrielle a tiny pass just because I felt like they had the six players in front of them were just not doing anything. They just weren't relieving any pressure. They just weren't doing anything. And for me personally, I have been on the other end of an ass whooping like that in my lifetime. And you can't do anything. At a certain point, you just start losing your mind and making bad challenges and kicking the ball weird and shit. So, for me, it's because I've seen Ben White do so well in the last couple of games. I'm just thinking he had being an Arsenal player at Anfield away for the first time moment, and he wasn't amazing. He wasn't, but like nobody was. But I hear what you're saying. Like you would probably have wanted like. It was probably that first dribble out, really. That was like he dribbled out and he was like, yeah, I'm coming. And he got blocked out and he was like, oh shit, this isn't Watford. Like, because he's probably feeling himself after that Watford game. He was like, okay, I'm about to do my thing. And it didn't work out. Like, so I think it was a little bit of that,
Yeah, I think it's more about because obviously, to go to Anfield, you have to be hard to beat, you have to be solid at the back. And I just feel like because we weren't, even though we didn't concede until the 39th to 40th minute or whatever it was. You know, they were on us, and there were times when I just thought, oh man, if he could just lead a little bit more from the back and maybe just slow it down a little bit and not give away silly fouls, I think we would have played better. But yeah, it's not a criticism of him as such, but I feel like Tavares has gotten a lot of stick for his mistake, and I'm like, God, Ben White was lucky a few times that we didn't concede.
Well,
Not to make the criticism of Tavares fair, but you know, it's really important to understand that sometimes we can't just have a go at player because it's his mistake that cost us.
It was the Tierney thing. It was all the build up around Tierney versus Tavares. I think that's what made it more heavy-handed on Nuno.
Yeah.
And because he literally gifted Jota the goal that really changed everything. I think the goals were going to come either way, but it really felt like when he passed that ball to Jota and they scored that second goal, it just deflated everything. But I agree with Yo-Yo, and I agree with you that I looked at the midfield and the people that were playing up top and just thought, could you have not held on to the ball a little bit longer? Could you not made better? Sambi was so poor at the beginning of the second half that he got taken out at the 50 something minute. I think that says a lot. So it's not to, I give like most of the defense a pass. I just thought Nuno, his mistakes were like, oh shit. And then because he also did it like 3 more times after as well, like he gave it up and then did it a couple more times. I was like, fuck, but I get it. Like the whole back line was not helped, and it's not fair to just single out Nuno. Ben White had some moments as well. Tomiyasu was not great. When I rewatched the game, I was like, oh yeah, he wasn't very good yesterday.
Was shaky. There are some times when Tomiyasu looks really shaky in possession, like a little bit awkward and uncomfortable, which is a little bit scary. And I remember sometimes I felt a little bit like that with Sagna because it didn't look, his body movement wasn't very fluid, and he didn't have like this open body shape. Yeah, when he got the ball, Sagna, sometimes it felt a little bit awkward, but he never really gave it away. He was quite confident with it. Whereas Tomiyasu feels a little bit awkward on the ball at times. I think just not to dwell on Ben White too much, but I think I'm more inclined to call someone out, even if that's the wrong expression, to call someone out who has got a little bit more Premier League experience and who knows what Anfield is like and who's been to Anfield before and understands the game we're in. Whereas with Sambi and Tavares, I can kind of give them a free pass because it's their first time there and they're still young in terms of Premier League experience. So I just would have expected a little bit more from Ben White. But yeah, anyway, we move on.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So I guess I have my last one, my last big thing. My last big thing really is we just need to calm down. Like as a fan base, I think a lot of people called this a humbling experience. I think from our perspective, it was humbling if you thought that because Brentford and Brighton and all these other teams went to Anfield and got points that we could win and all of this. And I do think that had we had played better and they had played a little bit worse, it would have been a lot closer. But I do think that this was a good reminder that we are nowhere near where we need to be, like in order to really count ourselves in these games. Like I know that we should be more competitive, but I just feel like there's a lot of people that are really disappointed, and I think for the day, and you could be kind of disappointed, but it doesn't mean that everything that we've done in the last 10 games means nothing. But also the last 10 games didn't mean that we're in the top 4 race. Like for me, that's how I kind of view it. Like I think we're in the top 4 race because of where we are in the table. But I think as the season goes on, we may fade away just a little bit because we will have games where these young players will cost us points. And that's just the reality. We don't have that big midfield, signing. Thomas Partey was supposed to be that. We can have more debates in the future whether or not he has been that for us, if he ever will. But we all know that we're a midfielder, a striker, and maybe one other signing short, and ESR and Saka's development short of really being where we feel like we should be. So personally, for me, I think this was a good reminder. It was a nice little experience to be like, okay, let's just calm down. I've seen a lot of like hyperbolic, like we should be demanding top 4. I don't think you can really demand that of this particular group of players. I think we need to be a little bit more relaxed about it. And so that when we have games like this, it doesn't feel like the end of the world. Because I feel like for some people, it really, really was. And I can't really understand why. Because for me, going into this game, we had to be perfect and they had to be a little bit shit for us to win. It really had
Yeah.
to. It was really had to be that. So for me,
I,
and there's nothing wrong with thinking that or what feeling like we should get top four with this particular team. But I personally look at this team and think they're going to drop more points than they probably should because they're just young and inexperienced, and we have to give them that. You know,
yeah,
that's just how I
100%.
feel.
Yeah, and I think when you said, the only way we go to Liverpool is if we are absolutely on it and they have an off day, I think the way we get top four this year is if we are absolutely on it and Manchester United, West Ham, and Leicester have off seasons, essentially. That's the way we make top four this season, is by being relatively consistent and hoping that the teams in and around us are inconsistent. I think I think any fan who was really, really going to town, I think ultimately they just want Arteta out, and it's another way of painting that agenda, but with different words. I feel like most Arsenal fans would say, okay, cool, that was shit, but if our expectations are my expectation for Arsenal is fourth place, right? I know we can still get fourth place regardless of that Liverpool result. I've said it 100 times. We just need to make sure that we beat Newcastle, beat Everton, and then we can slip up against Man United. We need to make sure we beat all the other teams below us. Essentially, that's how you get top four. I think for the past 6, 7 seasons, I might be wrong, but fourth place, the team that's finished fourth has lost anything between 5 and 13 games. So there is room, to lose some games. As bad as that sounds, we could probably lose 8, 9, 10 games and maybe still get fourth place. So there certainly doesn't warrant a meltdown. I think we can be disappointed with the performance. I think if I saw a total lack of effort and players like give up, just and look really, really like terribly clumsy, a little bit like City away when players were just like doing really, really
Now
stupid things.
that's not what I saw in this
Yeah,
game. It was
exactly.
still
Yeah,
bad, but it wasn't.
yeah.
It wasn't that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then I'd get oh my God, we're crap. But I don't get it, because even though we were awful, it was a different kind of awful, if that makes sense. There's lots of
Yeah.
ways to be awful.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's about expectations, and in the same respect, if many Arsenal fans are saying, top six is the most that we can hope for, then by default, we can't go away at Liverpool and expect to win. And the reason why we'll finish fourth, fifth, or sixth this season is because we're going to lose some games. And these are the sort of games that we will lose. I mean, it's really obvious. The games against Palace, unfortunately, that will happen again this season, which is why we'll finish fourth, fifth, or sixth. If those games against Palace didn't happen, we'd be winning the league. And we're not going to win the league this season because we're not good enough. But in the future, we can be. So it's really, really simple, right? The best teams win the most games, draw the least, and lose the least. And the teams who aren't as good don't do that. So these are the games,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that we're going to have to accept, as hard as it is. And that's not me making
Yeah.
a better in comment, or we've got a free hit or we've got to lose games. But sometimes
Bellerin comment.
that's
Yeah.
the way it
No.
goes. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I understand that, and like it's we had won 3 games in a row. We were due a loss at some point. Like odds wise, we were due a loss. It could. I mean, this is probably the best team to lose to because it feels like it's okay for us to lose to them a little bit. Like it's like, okay, well, it's not like we lost to Watford, so it is what it is. I just,
By the way, if we lose to Newcastle, be sure I'll be livid, and all of
but
those
that's what
people that have made assumptions, are right, because
that's why
that
I'm
will be
waiting.
unacceptable.
Because I only want to lose my head if we lose to Newcastle. I don't want to predict a loss and predict that everything that we've done is nothing because and then we win. Then I feel like I would have wasted a lot of energy. So the hope is that we are going to rebound from this and go again. I mean, Newcastle are at the bottom of the league and we're playing at home. We should beat them quite easily, so we'll definitely see what happens. But one thing is we were able to see what our team looked like playing our system against one of the best teams in the league. I think what we can probably discern from this group of games is that against the smaller teams, we do pretty well with our system. We still have moments or patches within the game where we kind of go into a shell and start defending. But generally, we do pretty well in a 4-2-3-1, playing our way against most teams, but we are nowhere near ready to play that way against the top teams. We played our way in our system against all of the big teams, Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool, and we've gotten killed 11-0. So we're just not we're not there yet with our system to play against, but we didn't do the 3-4-3 bunker down. We didn't do that thing. And I personally am happy that we didn't do that, because I don't think the result would have been any different, but we wouldn't have been able to see the holes and the really glaring issues that need to be addressed. And I hope that that's what they take away from this is, okay, so this is where we need to improve if we want to play this way and not have to like change our system every time we play a team that we don't feel like we match up well with, Did you think we should have went to a 5 at the back?
So interesting what you say. I think Michael Owen said something similar about you have to kind of, take the scars and then you can heal and then you can learn from your mistakes, playing that system. So, but I think that we have developed enough of a playing style in our preferred system to say that we can change our formation without it seeming like we're changing our identity or without it seeming desperate. So I personally, it's really, really tough. I think I would have went 3-4-3 personally. I think we spoke about it, on our group before the game, about the Tierney Tavares situation. I think maybe Arteta felt like he couldn't because Tierney's fitness, and also unfortunately on the right back side we don't have enough competent players who are in form where you could go right. Tomiyasu could perhaps play in the back three, and then we can play a right wing back. So maybe that's the reason why we didn't. But I do feel like my last hot take would be a slight criticism of Arteta in terms of I feel like maybe we went in there a little bit too overconfident in what we can do, and we could have perhaps just thought, you know what, this team are better than us, so let's switch it for today, just for this game, and let's be a little bit more resolute defensively. Let's make sure that we combat Trent and Salah, because even if you play right, Aubameyang off the left, slightly off the left, ESR off the left, overlapping fullbacks on the left, Trent is always going to go. He always goes. Doesn't matter what's the other way. He trusts Van Dijk. He trusts Matip enough to go. So I feel like that's the only thing that we could have done. And then mid-game, as the game was developing, then I was thinking, well, we should probably switch it around soon because we are struggling here. We're getting overrun. So that would be my only criticism of Arteta, is that I feel like going 3-4-3 might have been a better tactic. It might have not made any difference. But mid-game, I would have switched it 3-4-3 for almost project damage limitation. Because for me, it was like, we could have maybe walked away with a 2-0 rather than the 4-0. And that may have made it a little bit more comfortable. Whereas it felt like we just let the same thing happen over and over again. And we just expected lesser players to come in and change the game. That's what it felt like to me.
Do you think that this kind of points to the type of manager that Arteta is going to be long term? Do you think that he backs himself to be somewhat of like a Pep type, where once his players eventually, probably at some point, he probably envisions having a much better squad that he'll never have to change anything, and because they'll be so dominant that, because if like Liverpool and City do not change for anybody. They play their way no matter what. And maybe Arteta feels like that's the best way to be, even though there are a lot more modern young managers that switch their system based on the opponents, still do well. But maybe it's an eye to, because a lot of people are feeling like Arteta is very flexible. I think he did that to save his life. I think going to the 3-4-3 in certain instances was more about saving his life. But as soon as he got enough of the players that he felt like he needed, at the beginning of last season, he switched to a 4-2-3-1, and we really haven't looked back. Maybe that's just, he feels like, I'm going to go with this system because I envision myself to be a Pep or a Klopp. When I get those players, we won't ever have to switch. And in the meantime, we'll drop points because of it.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think that's what he's done throughout his Arsenal career, is pretty much stay as loyal as he can to that shape unless circumstances have forced him into a change. So you're right. And I've got no problem with that whatsoever. But I just think the game could have been slightly different if we approached it a little bit more defensively rather than from the standpoint of we're on great form, go there and show them what you can do. I feel like it should have been more, we're on great form, they are better than us, they're a little bit wounded. Let's be hard to beat for this game. Let's try and make it really difficult for them. And we didn't. But listen, hindsight is a wonderful thing, and it's really easy for me to say that after. And I think when you reference Pep or Klopp, the few times Pep has changed it in big games, it's fluffed, right? It's went really, really wrong in the Champions League games and whatnot. So I've got no problem with him staying with that. Continuity is important. Obviously just changing how you train for that one game is probably, quite a big thing for the coaches to prepare for. And then you have to go back against Newcastle to your original formation. So I've got no problem with him not changing it. But I do think mid-game, we should have tweaked something. Mid-game for sure. I feel like that can't be a debate because we got battered 4-0. And second half, we were awful. So I feel like mid-game, we should have said, do you know what? Damage limitation. Let's just go through at the back and make sure this doesn't turn into a bit of a laughing stock, which unfortunately it has turned into.
Damn, a laughing stock. Whew. Yeah, it wasn't good, was it? I was very tipsy at the end of that game, so I didn't really feel the effects as much, but now I'm feeling it and I'm like, oh, yeah, we were really shit, especially because I rewatched the game just earlier and I was like, whew, that was bad. But we moved.
Yeah, I watched it in the bath earlier. I was having a bath and I watched it earlier in the bath. I was just like,
you and these baths.
This is bad. This is bad. This is really bad.
I can't believe you'd ruin your bath with that.
Well, do you know what it is? It's the only time you get a real free hour, right? Where you can just sit back and relax for like an hour. So it's a really good time to watch like the last 60 minutes of the game, which wasn't good for you. It wasn't good for you.
But yeah, so there's still about 80 of you guys in here. Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. We're going to end it here. We're just at an hour. Perfect timing. We did, our 3 big takeaways from this game. But we're going to have a more in-depth breakdown at 9 p.m. UK time. And I have a special guest, Jared Carver from the Gooners Pod. Another American Gooner is going to be on here with me. And we're going to be going more in depth on this game, talking about the biggest talking points. I'm sure Aubameyang will come up. Does he need to be dropped? Thomas Partey, has he been a flop? All of these things that have been coming up since the drubbing at Anfield, we will be talking about in great detail at 9 p.m. UK time. So make sure you subscribe, like the video. Harry, thank you so much for joining me. I know you have like time off and all of that, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Of course. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.